keep wondering why life feels too loud lately. The room is quiet, but your thoughts buzz like a power line after rain. People you used to agree with now sound slightly off-key. Your body wants peace while your mind picks fights. If this sounds uncomfortably familiar, you might not be falling apart. You might be getting ready to wake up. Think of a radio that can finally catch a station it could never quite reach. Spiritual awakening can feel exactly like that first clean note cresting through the noise. The discomfort is not a punishment. It is a recalibration. You may notice surges of emotion that arrive without a tidy story. A scene from a movie makes you tearful for reasons you cannot explain. You walk into a room and read the mood before anyone speaks. Old memories stage surprise performances in your head, and you feel their weight as if no time has passed. When awareness expands, it sweeps the attic and opens boxes you did not know you stored. Dust rises before the air clears. Your relationships begin to shift in small but unmistakable ways. You hear yourself say no where you once said yes, just to be agreeable. Certain conversations feel like loops that go nowhere, and you are weary of looping. The complaints you repeat about your life begin to taste stale in your mouth. Underneath the boredom is a quiet longing for something you cannot yet name. That longing is the horizon at first light. Your body speaks in new languages. A restlessness that used to push you toward distraction now pushes you towards silence. You crave walks without your phone. When you sit still, your chest hums like a low drum, and you sense a space behind your sternum that wants attention. This is not a random glitch. It is your system matching the rhythm of what matters. You might also feel a heartbreaking tenderness toward people who are struggling. The neighbor who always complains suddenly looks like a person who is aching. You feel compassion rise where judgment normally lives, which confuses the part of you that used to feel safe by being right. It is the strength that comes from seeing more of the picture than you used to. All of this can be disorienting. Your mind will try to file these experiences under problem because that is what minds are trained to do. But look closely. The fatigue you feel after arguing online is not proof you are fragile. It is proof you are outgrowing the argument. The emptiness that follows buying something you do not need is not proof you are broken. It is proof your values are waking and asking to be fed. In this journey, you are not asked to become special. You are asked to become honest. The signs of awakening are not theatrical. They are ordinary moments threaded with a new kind of clarity. You will still wash dishes and answer emails, only now the water is cold against your hands in a way that invites presence. And the inbox becomes less a battlefield and more a set of choices you can meet with breath. If you have been sensing that your life is tilting towards something truer, stay with me. Next, we will map the experiences that often appear right before the light breaks. By the end, you will know how to recognize them for what they are and how to meet them without fear, so the music of your life can come through clean and strong. You may start to notice the world speaking in patterns, as if the same melody keeps finding you through different instruments. A phrase overheard in a cafe repeats inside a book you open that night. A number follows you from a receipt to a street address, to the timestamp on a message. Vivid dreams leave a residue that lingers through breakfast, not just as pictures, but as a felt instruction, a soft directive to call someone or to end a habit that quietly costs you. These echoes are not superstitions. They are the mind and the deeper mind meeting in the hallway and recognizing each other at last. Sensitivity often rises like a tide at this stage. Sounds seem louder and lights harsher, not because you are getting weaker, but because you are registering more. The filters that used to blunt your perception recede, and with that clarity comes a rawness that can feel like exposure. You may find yourself choosing the chair by the window and noticing the wind move in the leaves as if the tree were breathing. Moments that used to pass unnoticed now pull you into a slower gear. It is not indulgence, it is contact. Solitude begins to feel less like avoidance and more like oxygen. In the quiet, you sense a companionship that does not depend on whether anyone approves of you. The part of you that performs on command grows tired of its own tricks and asks to be retired with dignity. You will still show up for others, but more from abundance than from the bargain you once made with your worth. Sitting alone for a few minutes before opening your phone becomes the kind of simple ceremony that steadies your hands and calms the impulse to fill time with noise. Your identity loosens its grip, which is both liberating and unnerving. Roles that defined you start to feel like clothes that no longer fit. You may still wear them when the occasion calls for it, but you feel the seam give way, and with that awareness comes relief. The need to claim a fixed label softens, replaced by a curiosity about what your life is asking for today. When people push you to be the old version of yourself, you sense the cost of pretending, and you choose the honest discomfort of change. Intuition becomes less dramatic and more dependable. It is not a thunderclap. It is an inner tilt that guides your choices if you are willing to trust small signals. A quiet yes in the body that says stay. A faint pressure behind the eyes that says not this. You test it on minor decisions first. Which way to walk? Which project to begin, even if it scares you? Each time you follow the signal and it proves wise, you build a bridge of evidence that supports you when the stakes get higher. Over time, this becomes a form of self-respect, an agreement to stop abandoning what you know. Time itself changes texture. Some hours stretch like fresh dough, while others snap by in an instant, and the difference has less to do with tasks than with presence. When you are aligned, minutes feel roomy and enough. When you are out of alignment, even free time feels cramped. You start organizing your day by energy rather than by the most urgent demand. You learn to pause between actions. One breath at the sink before you answer the call. One breath at the door before you step into the meeting. In those pauses, the next right move often reveals itself without a fight. Relationships invite new boundaries that are less about building walls and more about adjusting the distance to preserve love. You do not need to win arguments the way you used to. You need to be truthful without cruelty and spacious without disappearing. Some connections will deepen as if a fresh channel has opened. Others will drift to a natural distance. You let them, even while the nervous system trembles, because you can feel that forcing closeness is a way of lying. In place of constant explanation, you offer a steadier presence, and the people who can meet you there will find you. The body keeps teaching. A knot in the stomach when you overpromise. A wave of heat when you are about to betray your own pace. A heaviness in the shoulders after scrolling through outrage. Rather than diagnosing these sensations as flaws, you begin to treat them as briefings. You listen, make a small adjustment, and notice how quickly ease returns. A sip of water and a minute of stillness. A tension dropping from the forehead into the chest, and the channel clears the way a river clears after a branch is lifted. What used to require a grand reset now happens in micro practices woven into ordinary moments. If you recognize yourself in these descriptions, take heart. You are not losing your edge. You are sharpening a different kind of blade, one that cuts through pretense and leaves room for truth. The next stretch of this journey is about understanding the specific signs that often appear just before the horizon begins to glow, and learning how to meet them in a way that turns friction into guidance and longing into direction. Stay with the feeling that something real is coming closer. It is. And you are becoming the kind of person who can meet it with both feet on the ground. There is a moment in this passage when your inner sky begins to show a pale line of color before the sun is visible, and certain experiences cluster near that horizon. One of the most telling is the sudden clarity about what drains you. Activities you once tolerated now feel unmistakably expensive. You notice how a single conversation can leave your chest tight for hours, while a quiet hour with a notebook restores you like cool water. The contrast grows bolder. You are not simply being moody. You're tracking cost in a new currency, and your body is teaching you how to spend it wisely. Another sign is the collapse of false urgency. The part of you that used to sprint toward every notification grows skeptical of the supposed emergency inside it. You still meet deadlines and answer messages, but you begin to sense that frantic speed is not the same as meaningful movement. When you let one email wait until after a walk and nothing terrible happens, a belief unhooks itself from the wall of your mind. You learn that attention is your real leverage, and you start investing it where it yields presence rather than exhaustion. Memory also behaves differently in this phase. Scenes from years ago return in crisp detail, but not to torment you. They arrive like couriers with unclaimed mail. You remember what you promised yourself when you were too young to enforce it. You remember small acts of kindness you forgot to thank. You remember a talent you set aside to be practical. These recollections do not require you to rewrite the past. They invite you to carry what is useful into the present with better care. You might find your voice warming as you speak to an older version of yourself. A softness that signals healing without ceremony. There is often a gentle rebellion against borrowed beliefs. Ideas that once felt absolute start to reveal their seams when you hold them to the light. You notice which rules you follow, only to avoid disappointing people who are not living your life. You notice where you confuse being agreeable with being loving. The shift is not loud. It is the steady choice to speak from your own center, even if your voice trembles. That center becomes easier to find when you give it small chances to lead. Say no to the invitation that carries a knot in your stomach. Say yes to the project that scares you in a way that feels honest. Each act strengthens the tuning of your inner instrument. Synchronicity tends to multiply here, not as magic tricks, but as feedback from a larger pattern you are beginning to perceive. You think of a friend, and they text. You consider changing a habit, and 3 separate cues appear the same day to support it. This does not mean you are being singled out by fate. It means you are listening to a wider signal, and the world is meeting you at that frequency. What once looked like coincidence starts to feel like choreography. Notice the humility that comes with that recognition. You are both participant and witness, willing to be moved by what is trustworthy and willing to move when truth asks. There can also be grief, quiet and profound. For the years spent asleep, you may feel a sadness for roads not taken, for parts of you that waited in the wings, while you played a role that earned applause, but not peace. Let the sadness pass through like rain that nourishes the soil beneath. Shame clogs the channel and keeps you arguing with what already happened. Grief cleans the channel and returns you to the present where choice lives. When tears come, let them be uncomplicated. They soften what was rigid and reveal a tenderness that can finally guide your hands. A practical marker appears in your relationship with silence. What once felt empty now feels full. You sit without music for a few minutes and the quiet becomes a room you recognize. In that room, insights often arrive without strain. You remember to drink water before the headache. You sense which task will unlock the day if you do it first. You catch a thought that used to drag you into a familiar spiral and you let it pass like a bus you do not need to board. These are not small victories. They are proof that presence changes outcomes in ways the mind alone cannot predict. You may also feel a pull towards service that is less about credit and more about contribution. You want to leave each place a little clearer than you found it. You reply kindly to the message that deserved patience. You pick up the cup someone left in the park. You mentor a younger colleague because you remember how a single, steady voice once steadied you. This impulse is not martyrdom. It is the natural overflow that comes when your life begins to align with what you value. You do not announce it. You live it. If any of these signs are showing up for you right now, tell me in the comments which one is most alive and where it is nudging your next small step. Because naming it out loud is often the moment it gains traction. When people read each other, they find language for their own experience faster, and that shared clarity becomes another way the signal strengthens. Stay close to the simple practices that anchor you. Breathe before you answer. Place a hand on your chest when you need to remember where your voice starts. Step into the morning light for a minute before you open the world on your phone. Walk without a destination to let the mind uncurl. If you keep attending to these ordinary doors, the extraordinary has a way of stepping through and meeting you like a familiar friend. There is a quiet pivot when you realize your story about yourself is only one version, and that version was written to keep you safe. You start to see the edits you made to fit a room, the scenes you replayed to justify a fear, the places you hid so no one could touch the tender spot that felt unfixable. Awakening does not erase these pages, It returns you to the original language beneath them. In that language, you can tell the truth without dramatics. I was afraid, and I made myself small. I wanted love, and I settled for approval. I did not know how to choose, and so I let the loudest voice choose for me. When you name it cleanly, something unclenches. The honesty itself becomes a door. Forgiveness arrives in more practical clothes than expected. It is not a performance. It is the removal of a hook from your own skin. You stop needing the other person to agree that it hurt for you to put the hook down. You stop waiting for the apology that may never come before you let your hands open. The memory does not vanish. The charge loosens. Space appears where the knot lived. And into that space slips a level of peace that feels almost suspicious until you realize it does not require anyone else to behave differently. This kind of forgiveness protects your boundaries rather than dissolving them. It is a yes to your life as it continues. Creativity resurfaces even if you do not think of yourself as creative. It looks like fresh curiosity about how to cook dinner without rushing. It looks like rearranging the corner of a room so the light falls on your chair in the hour you like to read. It looks like song fragments in the shower and sentences that tap your shoulder while you wait for the bus. You discover that making things is not about proving you are gifted. It is about giving shape to the current moving through you. When you make small things in good faith, the current strengthens, and larger ideas show up already warmed by your attention. Your relationship with fear changes tone. The old fear screamed and you reacted or resisted or froze. The new fear whispers, and you lean in close to hear what it wants to protect. You may realize it has always been trying to keep you from exile. Thank you, you say inside, and now I will lead. The body feels this transfer of authority. The breath deepens, the shoulders drop. You still feel the pulse of adrenaline when you step into the room or speak the truth that could change a relationship, but you are no longer shocked by your own aliveness. Instead, you take it as proof that you are touching the edge where growth lives. Paradox becomes a companion instead of a problem to solve. You can care for someone and still choose distance. You can grieve a chapter and feel relieved that it is over. You can be devoted to your craft and rest when your body is clear that rest is the honest next move. Maturity here feels like the ability to hold two accurate truths without making a courtroom out of your mind. You notice how much energy returns to you when you stop arguing with the complexity of being human. That energy becomes available for presence, and presence makes good decisions less effortful. Nature often becomes a teacher because it refuses to hurry. You feel the patience of trees, and it steadies your own pace. You watch a river alter its course around a rock without drama, and you understand a strategy you could not put into words before. You catch the moon suspended in daylight, and remember that not all change needs darkness to arrive. These are not mystical messages. They are reminders that you belong to a living world with its own timing, and that forcing your life to sprint on command is a habit, not a requirement. The body continues to speak in clearer sentences. You notice the clean exhaustion that follows honest work and the sticky exhaustion that follows pretending. You drink more water, not as a goal, but because you are listening. You step outside for 2 minutes and feel your system recalibrate as if the earth itself were a tuning fork. Sleep becomes a negotiation with kindness. You darken the room, quiet the screen, and forgive yourself for not finishing everything, because you can now feel that tomorrow depends on how well you rest today. Relationships reorganize around your growing capacity for truth. You start telling people what you actually need, and you do it before resentment builds a case that feels impossible to try. You catch yourself mid-explanation and choose a simpler sentence. Here is what would help. Here is what I can offer. Here is what I cannot offer right now. This does not mean you become cold. It means warmth gets to flow where it belongs instead of leaking through every cracked boundary. The people who can meet you at this level often rise to it with relief because they were waiting for someone to model the conversation they did not know how to start. You will notice that language itself refines. You drop phrases that keep you small. You stop calling yourself lazy when what you feel is tired and deserving of care. You stop calling yourself broken When what you feel is grief that wants movement, the words you choose change the way your nervous system understands what is happening. When you say "I am learning" instead of "I am failing," the mind updates its map. The route ahead appears where there used to be a wall. At this point, the horizon that once felt theoretical begins to glow with shape. Not everything is clear, but enough is clear that you can take the next step with your full weight. You understand that awakening is less a fireworks show and more a steady sunrise that keeps revealing what was always there. Nothing is wasted. Even the detours trained your eye to recognize the path when it appeared. Keep walking. Keep listening. There is wisdom in your chest that has waited a long time to be trusted, and it grows more articulate each time you let it speak through the way you live. Purpose begins to reveal itself in quieter tones than the culture advertises. Instead of a trumpet blast announcing a grand mission, it often arrives as a steady pull toward what feels honest and useful. You notice that certain tasks leave you more alive when you finish them, even if they are simple. You notice that certain conversations expand your chest as if a window opened. You pay attention to what you would do without applause. The pattern starts to form a contour you can trace with your days. It does not demand instant reinvention. It asks for faithful practice. Put your hands on the work that returns you to yourself. Do it with care. Let repetition shape you like a river-shaped stone. Humility becomes a strength you choose instead of a posture you fake. You stop needing to be the smartest voice in the room because you are more interested in being the clearest listener. You ask better questions. What is the real problem here? What wants to happen if no one is trying to win? You learn from people who are skilled at what you value rather than from people who are simply loud. This humility does not shrink you. It makes you exact. You can feel when a task is within your capacity and when you need help, and you ask without decorating the request in shame. Life becomes less about performing competence and more about building it. Discipline changes flavor. It no longer tastes like punishment. It tastes like alignment. You keep small promises to yourself and notice how confidence grows from the evidence of follow-through. 5 minutes of stillness before your first message. A brief review of your day so you can end it clean. A respectful boundary with the screen that used to rob your attention when you were tired. These are not rules for their own sake. They are rituals that protect the signal you are learning to trust. When you miss a day, you return without theatrics because devotion is not a drama. It is a practice that resumes. Your relationship with money and work may shift as values come into focus. You can feel which projects are fueled by fear and which are powered by service. You do not shame yourself for needing to pay bills. You look for ways to bring integrity to the work you already do while you cultivate the new direction that pulls at your sleeve. You might find yourself simplifying expenses that once signaled status because that status no longer feels like safety. Paradoxically, this simplicity often produces more room for generosity, and generosity becomes less about display and more about quiet support that keeps the light on where it matters. Community becomes a living subject rather than an abstract ideal. You recognize the friends who know how to hold your growth without trying to manage it, and you offer them the same refuge. You realize that belonging is not the same as agreement. It is the respect that allows difference without demanding distance. You practice showing up when it is inconvenient in small ways that build trust. A message when you sense someone withdrawing. A visit without a reason beyond presence. A willingness to say "I was wrong" when you were wrong. These acts accumulate into a fabric that can carry weight when life gets heavy. Surrender finds its proper place. It is not passivity. It is cooperation with reality once you have done what you can. You make the call, send the proposal, speak the truth that needs speaking. Then you let the result unfold without trying to yank it into shape. You begin to feel the difference between effort that honors the moment and effort that tries to dominate it. The first leaves you clear even when the outcome is uncertain. The second leaves you exhausted even when you get what you demanded. This discernment frees a tremendous amount of energy, which returns to you as steadiness. Your sensitivity stabilizes as you learn to regulate rather than to retreat. You can stay open in a difficult conversation without abandoning yourself because you have learned how to touch the breath when the heartbeat quickens. You notice the early signs of overwhelm and take a brief reset before your words go sharp. You practice returning attention to the body when the mind tries to sprint. Over time, the body trusts you to lead, and you trust the body to signal when something is off. That partnership is one of the most reliable fruits of this phase. Curiosity widens to include what you used to resist. You study the mechanics of your own defense instead of shaming it. You discover the belief that your worth depends on your output, and you test life without that requirement for an afternoon. You notice the habit of planning every contingency, and you experiment with a single space in the day that remains unscheduled. These modest experiments are powerful because they generate direct experience. You are no longer arguing with concepts. You are letting reality teach you in real time which arrangements support your clarity and which arrangements cost too much. Gratitude shifts from a list you force to a recognition that arrives unbidden. You catch yourself smiling at the way sunlight lands on a countertop. You feel a surge of appreciation for the person who held the door when your hands were full. You find yourself thanking the version of you from last week who made a decision that eased today. Gratitude becomes less about convincing yourself to be positive and more about noticing what is already nourishing. This noticing adjusts your perception and therefore your choices, which means gratitude is not an accessory. It is a method. Finally, there is a sense that you are being prepared for greater responsibility, not in the sense of carrying a heavier load, but in the sense of carrying yourself with more precision. You understand that your presence affects the field around you. Your tone shapes a meeting before your ideas do. Your attention calms or agitates a room without you saying a word. This awareness is not pressure. It is permission to be deliberate. Walk in with the signal tuned. Do the next right thing. Let the day be shaped by clarity rather than by habit. When you fall short, repair quickly and continue. The sunrise keeps coming, and each morning invites you to meet it with more of who you truly are. There comes a phase when the light you have been tending meets the weather of an ordinary hard day. And this is where awakening matures from insight into embodiment. You wake up already behind on time. A message misreads your traffic stalls. The sink is full. For a moment, the old reflex takes the wheel, and the mind reaches for the story that everything is against you. Then the training you have been collecting shows itself. You feel the breath return to its deeper lane. You remember that the point is not to avoid friction, but to meet it without abandoning yourself. The day is no longer a battlefield. It is a field for practice. You begin to notice how quickly the nervous system resets when you offer it a single honest gesture. A slow inhale while your hands touch the counter. A straightening of the spine before you answer. The body responds like a loyal friend relieved to be consulted, and the mental weather shifts by a few degrees, which is often all you need to choose differently. This does not mean you never snap or sulk. It means you recover faster and repair sooner. The gap between reaction and responsibility shortens, and within that narrowing gap, your life changes shape. Old patterns still visit, especially under fatigue, but they arrive like familiar travelers rather than like authorities. You recognize the urge to over-explain when you feel misunderstood. You recognize the impulse to chase approval when you feel unsteady. Instead of obeying the impulse, you greet it and ask what it is trying to protect. Most patterns are guardians with outdated maps. When you thank them for how they once helped and let them stand down, the body releases a surprising amount of energy. That released energy becomes available for presence. And presence is what keeps the signal clean. Integrity grows teeth in this season. You tell the truth with more precision, not because you enjoy confrontation, but because pretending has become too expensive to carry. You notice how peaceful you sleep after a difficult but honest conversation, and how restless you feel after a polite lie. You begin to measure success by alignment rather than by applause. Some people will misunderstand this shift and call it selfishness, especially if your previous generosity was a way to secure love. The new generosity is quieter and sturdier. It is a yes that can be trusted because it is not hiding a resentful no. Your focus on the essentials sharpens. You start designing your days around what actually nourishes you and what tangibly serves your responsibilities. The screen still tempts you to scatter your attention into 100 small pieces, but you can feel the cost now, and you choose to spend attention like a craftsman uses a blade, one cut at a time, one task brought to a clean stop. There is relief in this rhythm. When you close an activity fully before opening the next, your mind stops dragging the residue of unfinished business through every room you enter. Compassion widens without losing discernment. You see more of what drives people to act the way they do, and that vision softens the reflex to judge, but it does not erase boundaries. You can hold someone's pain with respect and still decline to carry their consequences. You can love a person's essence and still refuse their behavior. This balance protects the heart from cynicism. It allows you to remain open without being porous. When the world feels heavy, this balance keeps you capable of small, useful actions that multiply over time. You begin to trust pacing as wisdom. In the earlier stages, you rush to apply every insight immediately, as if afraid it might evaporate. Now you let understanding settle and change your posture before you change your plans. You make adjustments that are incremental and sustainable. You choose structures that are strong enough to hold your growth without demanding perfection. Sleep that is regular instead of spectacular. Food that is respectful rather than performative. Movement that is consistent rather than dramatic. These choices are quiet, but they accumulate into a baseline of stability that makes deeper work possible. The sense of guidance becomes ordinary in the best way. You do not wait for a lightning strike to know your next step. You listen for the subtle tilt that has been faithful all along. A conversation wants to be had. A book wants to be finished. A room wants to be cleaned, so your attention stops snagging on clutter. Following these small directives reveals how often clarity is practical. You are learning to be led by what is clear rather than by what is loud. This brings dignity to the smallest corner of your day, and that dignity is contagious. There are days when grief revisits without a clear reason. You may feel the ache of a former version of your life, or the ache for a future you can sense but cannot yet live. Instead of diagnosing the ache, you give it room. You let yourself be the person who can feel deeply and still return emails. The heart is a generous instrument. It can sing and work at once. When you allow the song without shame, the work often improves because it is being done by the actual you rather than by your armored representative. Failing becomes information instead of identity. You try a new boundary and mangle the delivery. You attempt a habit and forget it for 3 days. You watch the mind rush to name you a fraud, and you decline the bait. You clean up what needs cleaning, apologize where you were clumsy, and ask what would make the next attempt 1% easier to keep. Iteration replaces self-attack. Over time, this stance becomes a way of moving through the world that is both kinder and more effective than the old cycle of pressure and collapse. What is emerging is a steadiness that does not depend on every condition leaning in your favor. The radio inside you stays tuned even when the city is loud. The horizon keeps brightening even when clouds pass across it. You are becoming a person who can be entrusted with your own clarity, who can carry it into traffic and meetings and dinner and sleep, who can miss the mark and course correct without losing heart. This is the quiet confidence on the near side of awakening. It is not a costume or a sermon. It is the way you stand in your life and the way your life stands with you. You have been listening to a signal grow clearer inside you, moving from static to music, from a guess to a knowing you can feel in your hands. The signs that once startled you now read like landmarks on a road you recognize. Sensitivity has become discernment. Longing has become direction. Practice has become a way of living rather than a rescue you reach for only when you are overwhelmed. What used to feel like a private strangeness has revealed itself as a natural intelligence guiding you toward what is true. This is not a finish line. It is a first light that keeps widening as you walk. There will still be complicated days. The world will keep asking for your attention in 100 loud ways. Yet you know how to tune again. You know how to return to the breath, how to place a hand on your chest, And listen, how to let silence refill you even while life hums around you. You understand that real strength is not the absence of tenderness. It is the capacity to remain open without losing the anchor that steadies your choices. You understand that love is not performance. It is presence offered with clear boundaries and a willingness to repair when you miss. If you are feeling the nearness of awakening, trust that it is not a rare event granted to the few, but a human capacity remembering itself in you. Keep choosing the small, honest act over the grand, dramatic gesture. Keep meeting yourself with the kind of attention that heals rather than judges. Keep noticing how the simplest ritual restores the channel that lets guidance reach you. When you do, life stops being a problem to solve and becomes a relationship to tend, and that relationship teaches you how to move with clarity even when the path curves out of sight. If this journey speaks to you, and you want steady companions as the horizon brightens, let this be the moment you decide to stay close. Subscribe so the next chapters find you the way sunrise finds a window that is ready to receive it. Together, we can keep practicing the ordinary courage that turns insight into a way of living, returning to the music beneath the noise and letting it shape the day with quiet authority.